Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management technology and solutions.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Freight Project podcast. On today's episode, we welcome Margaret Bendis, U.S. marketing specialist for a company called EazyStock, a cloud-based software-as-a-solution provider that optimizes inventory management. In this episode, Margaret and I will talk about the importance of proper inventory management, especially for small and mid-sized businesses. Margaret then illuminates upon the potential red flags inventory and supply chain managers must look out for to stay ahead of any inventory management issues, as well as how good inventory management improves the supply chain and what are the adverse impacts to the supply chain due to poor inventory management. We'll then both talk about the increasing digitization of the supply chain and what is the future of digitization as it relates to inventory and how it allows supply chain executives to focus more on strategy and reduce time spent on inventory management. Margaret will also speak about how important solid practices in inventory management aids retailers' goals to effectively execute omnichannel strategies, as well as what future advanced technologies will impact not only inventory management, but the supply chain at large. We hope you enjoy another episode of the Freight Project podcast. And thanks for joining us here today, Margaret, on the Freight Project podcast. Excited to have your unique insights as you represent another discipline in the supply chain, specifically inventory management. Now, Ceresys is wanting to have guests and folks from a whole bunch of different disciplines in the supply chain because just so we happen to have solutions for transportation management doesn't mean that our customers and people in the industry don't need to know about the other supply chain disciplines. So thanks for coming on the Freight Project podcast, Margaret. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what company you work for and what you do at the company.
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me, Adam. As Adam was saying, I'm Margaret, and I am the U.S. marketing specialist for a company called EazyStock here in the U.S. EazyStock is a cloud-based software as a solution that helps optimize inventory management. And we work primarily with small and mid-sized wholesalers and distributors to make sure that they always have what they need, when they need it, and where they need it. And personally, I started with EazyStock just right out of college, and I've been amazed at how distributors can solve so many problems and overcome so many challenges with just the right piece of technology, be it EazyStock or any other kind of software.
Well, I got to tell you, it's baffling to the mind that folks even want to be in logistics and supply chain because there is so much to do. It's always doing less with more, and you don't always have the right resources, and there's about a bazillion moving parts. So a logistics manager or a supply chain director has a lot of people or processes under their belt, and they're really needing those solutions. And since your company and you are in the solutions industry for inventory management, there's clearly an important role for the practice of good and effective inventory management in the supply chain. So could you illuminate for our audience, since you're really at the heart of those solutions and helping logistics managers, supply chain execs, people in retail get more efficient in inventory management, what is the role that proper inventory management, especially for small and mid-sized businesses, plays in achieving your overall goals in the supply chain?
For sure. Well, what people don't realize about inventory management is that it can really open the door for companies to grow and to expand. And big companies have this figured out. If you think of the brands that you see or that you use every day, their influence is felt across the globe. So creating and then sustaining that kind of network is a product of well-balanced inventory. And we talk about inventory management. That includes everything from demand analysis and reordering to processing returns to redistributing among the stock location network to even just how items are arranged in your warehouse for the fastest picking and the fastest packing. And the best inventory management ensures that you have what you need in the amount you need, where and when you need it. And this sounds like a no-brainer, but it's really no simple task. And anticipating your customers' needs involves a deep analysis of inventory trends. So for small and mid-sized businesses, this is the real challenge. It's not really a task for one person to be doing manually, especially not when there can be hundreds or even thousands of SKUs in the warehouse or multiple locations to sift through.
Yeah, I mean, see, just chasing down SKUs, chasing down processes. Where's my stuff? Oh, I got to ship it. And wait, I got to source the materials too. And then I have to pay attention to things like the capacity crunch and competition from retailers, e-commerce, and Amazon. I told y'all it's hard out there for a supply chain exec. And so what do they need? Well, they need really, great collaboration with partners. They need to, what are the latest trends? They need to understand how they can improve their processes. They need great technology and partners to get and help them to where they need to go through data, through exception management, et cetera. And so at Ceresys, we like to help that along, not only with our solutions for transportation management, but we've really looked at our content, our blog, and our podcast, as folks are listening to here, as a way to educate the industry at large to help them achieve their goals. And part of that is risk management. I think inventory management really plays into that really well, often sometimes known as red flags or black swans that you identify within your supply chain. So what are some red flags for businesses to look out for in inventory management?
Well, small and mid-sized businesses, or SMBs, they need to be especially critical of their operations. And there are some very clear signs and red flags that your inventory in particular is not performing as well as it could and as well as it should be. One of the big ones that small and mid-sized businesses see is time-consuming manual administration. And this is when your buyer or your inventory manager is spending just too much time determining what to order, and it's an impossible task for one person to try to do accurately by hand. Another red flag is excess inventory in the warehouse, and this is just having too much capital tied up in stock, and it's completely useless and it's just draining your resources. But on the flip side of that, you also have to be wary of high risk of runout. And this is when you're constantly not having what you need to cover your demand, and you're just constantly resorting to these high cost rush orders. Another big red flag is lack of visibility. And this can be lack of visibility over your supply chain, over your stock location network, over your inventory. Just if you're not able to see everything that you're supposed to be managing, how can you do it accurately? But really, the most telling sign of all is when there are just poor customer service levels. And this is when businesses are constantly not able to fulfill demand, and they're frequently garnering poor customer reviews. And that's really the biggest sign that something needs to change. Inventory management is all about minimizing your costs and your investments while you're streamlining the flow of goods and you're ensuring those high customer service levels. And small and mid-sized businesses don't recognize the savings just waiting for them in their inventory in terms of money and time.
Well, I got to tell you, at the heart of today's executive mind, what they're really pushing for and being told by the marketplace, thanks to Amazon and the evolution of retail stores from just simply being a place where folks buy products to really an experience. It's all about customer experience. And I think you hit on the heart of where folks in the supply chain really have to consider beyond just costs or, effectively just getting product from warehouse to customer. You really have to think about, okay, what's the experience by the customer? Because a bad hashtag on Instagram or Twitter can really do a lot of damage. And you have to consider that these days, and I remember with Ford, right? Back in the day, the manufacturer or the producer had all the power. You could get a T-model Ford in any color as long as you picked black, because you were just forced to. There were no options. And there's just so much competition and so much out there that customers are really empowered. And so with that said, we also talk about how these individual disciplines in the supply chain, especially from our perspective in transportation management, really impacts the entire supply chain, whether it's in customer service levels or too high of cost and it's hurting your bottom line. I mean, that has to be similar in how you educate your customers on how effective inventory management impacts their overall supply chain. So how can good inventory management improve the overall supply chain, and what are the adverse impacts to the supply chain due to poor inventory management?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's important that every step of the supply chain, from inventory management and transportation management, for example, that are function smoothly and cohesively. And it's really true that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And you
I
can
see what you
really
did
get
there. I like it.
you can really get a sense of how inventory management affects the supply chain as a whole when you're looking at the ultimate goal of an organization, and this is to grow your business, whether it's by offering great customer service, cutting your costs wherever you can, or staying ahead of your competition, likely some combination of the three. And inventory management really helps address all three of these tactics to help streamline your supply chain. So without inventory management, companies are scrambling to fulfill orders, they're struggling to analyze demand trends for hundreds or thousands of SKUs, and they're unnecessarily spending just exorbitant amounts of money on day-to-day operations and excess stock. And when inventory management isn't functioning properly, this just causes a massive slowdown in the supply chain. And I'm sure you can say this about any piece of the supply chain. And with inventory management, you see suppliers getting frustrated as last minute orders are frequently placed, or maybe distributors are getting frustrated and they're constantly waiting for orders to be completed or have to rush orders that really just should have been easy to handle in the first place. So poor inventory management is placing unnecessary stress on the supply chain, and it really just backs up your operations.
Yeah. And we see that all the time. Obviously, as you said, with any discipline within the supply chain, inventory management or transportation management, if you don't know the best practices, it really does hurt the overall supply chain. So again, us being in marketing, we're trying to show those problems. We're trying to help our customers overcome them. And we both cover the market quite intimately. So we better understand it, and we better create content that really speaks to the heart of those issues and problems, so we can help maybe give them some knowledge to overcome them, and then extend that to our company's services and solutions to continue to help solve those problems. And obviously, as we're in the middle of the market and we're marketing and writing content daily, we're seeing the burgeoning trends in the supply chain. And one of those is the use of digital systems and tools to get benefits in the supply chain. So when it comes to inventory management and purchasing inventory specifically, what do you think the future of digitization as it relates to inventory is? Will that make businesses less operational, or will it make them more strategic? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, supply chain digitization, that is a tricky word, is definitely on the up and up. And for those big enterprise-sized businesses, digitization is already a way of life. And now it's really time for the small and mid-sized businesses to jump on board. And with today's just vast tools and knowledge at our disposal, I mean, small and mid-sized businesses really do have the tools and the chances to catch up with those big players. And there are so many reasons to make that move to digital processes and to management. But I'd say the top three are globalization. You're seeing a rise of e-commerce, and you're seeing rising customer expectations. So with globalization, I mean, you've seen our world get smaller. There are supply chains extending across continents, across oceans, both for sourcing and distribution. You have arrows drawn across the globe every which way. And digitization is really the only way to ensure that the entire supply chain is connected and on the same page, because it allows companies to connect and to share that info and to share that really necessary data in real time. And this was just unheard of, even 50 years ago. That next layer, e-commerce, this just adds more and more complexity to the supply chain, because brick and mortar stores are no longer the only consideration for consumers. With consumers able to order right from their phones and their other devices, we see a spread of distribution hubs, for example. And this means that your inventory management is growing more and more complex as you are just pushing goods from different areas, and you're stretched thinner and thinner. And those customer expectations are now higher than ever too, because why make it easy? And customers also have more power than ever, for good or for evil. So with e-commerce, it allows those consumers to shop around for the best deals, and I know I do this, and reviews can now be posted for all of the world to see. So digitizing the supply chain and your inventory management helps companies really keep up with these rising demands. And many companies, especially small and mid-sized businesses, are wary of adding software to manage their supply chain operations. Some are put off by the time it takes to select and then implement the right software. Others are worried about the costs, and others are worried that it'll make their employees redundant. But by digitizing the supply chain, really companies only stand to gain. And this falls for enterprise-sized companies, small and mid-sized businesses as well. With inventory management, for example, there are plenty of no-fuss, low-cost options for software. And without digitization, companies are focused entirely on these day-to-day operations, just making it through the day's orders, just trying to determine what they'll need to get through tomorrow. But with digitization, companies can stop spending time on just getting by, and they can focus on strategy. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where the ultimate goal of a business is essentially to grow. Well, if your employees are spending 1 hour a day on inventory management instead of 8, think of what can happen with those 7 extra hours. They can focus on expanding product portfolios, evaluating new suppliers, finding new markets. I mean, the options are really unlimited. And digitization is what allows companies to shift from focusing solely on operations to devoting time to strategy and growing their business.
Oh, that's really helpful. And I think a lot of execs and a lot of people in the industry, we've been seeing the term digital supply chain a lot. Mm-hmm. And some people don't know what that means. And, they're starting to understand what it means. And, essentially it's applying the use of technology and advanced technology to get to where you want to go a little more effectively. And so as supply chains go more digital, and especially retailers are looking to go omni-channel to reach customers at every place they can possibly buy, such as the move towards more e-commerce, as you illuminated, how important is inventory management to aid in retailers' goals to effectively execute omni-channel strategies?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Adam. Omnichannel is another product of digitization, and it does sound a little scary. It's kind of a scary word, omnichannel. But in the end, it's really all about transparency for the consumer and minimizing complexity in the supply chain, and who doesn't want that? So with omnichannel, what you really want is for the consumer to have the same experience regardless of where they encounter your company, whether it's going to the website on their phone, whether they're walking into one of the brick and mortar locations, whether they're seeing an ad on social media, they're getting the same experience with the company at every touch point. But maintaining this level of transparency requires that your business be able to support those high customer expectations. And again, optimizing inventory management is one of the best ways to help streamline your supply chain. And it doesn't just stop at inventory management either. You mentioned earlier about how Ceresys focuses on transportation management. So making sure that every link in your supply chain is optimized and streamlined from supplier all the way down to your customer is really key to sustaining effective omnichannel operations. And it doesn't even stop there. It doesn't stop at making sure every link is optimized because they all also have to work together seamlessly. It doesn't do you any good to have amazing inventory management, but then no way to communicate with your 3PL or with your distributor. So as consumers are offered various ways to buy from a retailer, great inventory management is truly critical. You have customers ordering for pickup in stores, customers ordering for delivery to various locations, along with customers who are shopping in the brick and mortar locations. This is a big spread for inventory, especially when you start factoring in complications like returns, for example. So it's a lot of moving pieces to keep track of, and it's not something your inventory manager can successfully do in an Excel sheet.
Oh, heck no. And I got to tell you, I'm sitting there trying to, pull off marketing campaigns, and I don't even use Excel just for that anymore because, as you know, the logistics of making marketing work can be quite complex. Not as complex as some of the supply chains out there, but nonetheless process intensive, and there's different players involved who own different tasks. And so that takes a lot of good, scalable coordination, and usually a platform or some sort of technology is going to help you do that. And so finally, since we're talking about forward-looking digital tech in the supply chain, we've recently wrapped an entire series on blockchain, and it seems to be the hottest thing out there today. Might be biased because I had just put out that series, and when you own a car, you see every single car looks like yours and is your model because you're used to seeing it. So maybe it's that. But how is blockchain poised to change maybe procurement processes, documentation, track and trace, and overall visibility as it relates to inventory management? And do you think it will take hold in inventory management like we think it will in transportation management?
Well, you're right. Blockchain is just a big buzzword. And at present, it's being thrown around kind of like a panacea, like this cure for all ills in the supply chain. And this is usually the case for any new technology. But as technology just continues to rapidly evolve, that's when you discover the ones that will stand the test of time, so to speak. So one thing that blockchain could potentially achieve for inventory management in particular is eliminating any intermediaries and definitely improving accuracy as well. Because blockchain, people always associate it with Bitcoin, for example, but it's really just a ledger that is impossible to hack or to alter. So sharing this data this easily and this clearly with the rest of the players in your supply chain can really only serve to enhance visibility and cohesion. But at least for inventory management, blockchain does have a ways to go yet before there's any real traction in it with inventory management. So I would say while there is vast potential, don't put all your eggs in this basket just yet, and focus on streamlining inventory management to address your current challenges and get your supply chain running more smoothly with other existing technology.
That's right. Yeah. There's a lot to be done to optimize using technology in the supply chain as it stands. We always we do it in marketing. We do it in a lot of business disciplines where we see a shiny object and we go, that's interesting.
Exactly.
Please let it be my panacea. But the reality is there is no panacea for anything, and the fundamentals are key. And you can help optimize those fundamentals with really smart investments in good existing technology today. So at any rate, Margaret, thank you so much for a really complete rundown on effective inventory management, some best practices. And I know our audience is really going to learn a lot of good nuggets that you have imparted upon them in this episode on the Freight Project podcast. So thanks for giving us your time and being a guest today. We really appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. Well, for everybody out there listening, thanks for tuning in to the Freight Project podcast. We'll have another episode next Tuesday, and we hope to have you as an audience member. Take care and goodbye.